So, again, hello and welcome. It's nice to see all of you here. And as I said, now we are here to visit, to listen to Sebastian, who has a nice talk about overcoming modern authorization challenges with open source software. And yeah, I'm happy that you are here. The recording again is only hosted on YouTube so that you can review it later, and other people's not here can also have a look at this topic. And the slides are uploaded on the website that I'm going to link here in the video so that you can have access to this also. One or two topics before we start with the actual talk. This is the last session before the pause, before the summer vacation pause. So the next and the following months, there will not be any event, and it will only start in September again. Also, if you like to participate in this event by giving a talk, then you can contact me and I'm going to help you set up your own talk here, and yeah, so that you can share your knowledge and experience as well. And what also is different in this format is that you are welcome to write questions in the chat and also unmute yourself and ask those questions. And after the talk, Sebastian told me we have plenty of time to just yeah, stay here, ask questions, discuss the topic or other relevant topics. And yeah, this is it from me. And oh yeah, one more thing. Sorry, one more thing. We are also hosting this series of events on meetup.com, and I would highly appreciate a good rating for this event on meetup.com. The background of this is simply that I got some not very positive ratings, and I simply don't know why this is. So rate whatever you want on Meetup. I would be happy if this is a good rating, but if you think there is something missing or that something that could be improved, just take the time, please, and write it in the comments so that I know what I can change to the positive. All right, that's it from me. Now to Sebastian with his authorization talk. Sebastian, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. So, if I remember correctly, we had a chat in the beginning of the year, and I told you about this topic I really like to speak about. As you say, it's on authorization. Not sure if it's really necessary to speak English, but yeah, let's just go on. So myself, I'm currently working as a lead systems engineer at for the government, so federal, I don't know, statistics bureau, and privately I do Java user group Darmstadt and try to be involved in open source software. Decloak is my favorite project, which will also have a part in this talk. Yeah, it could be more because I have a family, and yeah, I like to be part of this family and be with my kids and wife. So very important. Nothing I share here is somehow related to my work. It's just everything that I do more fun. So what is the issue? The issue is authorization, and it's not maybe just my opinion. So if you look at people that really care about security, they publish this ranking from OWASP, and it's still number one. So broken access control. If you specifically look at a list of security risks for APIs, it's even mentioned in 3 of these top 10 security issues when it comes to APIs. So for me, a reason to look into it. And maybe the problem evolved over time. So if you look at the context of that problem nowadays, we have the issue of, I don't know, technology has exploded. There are a lot of languages, frameworks. Everything needs to be deployed in various ways. We have an interconnected world, maybe software that needs to be reachable all over the world, no downtime allowed, etc. And maybe also fun because everyone has his mobile phone. There's a lot of user-generated content, and people, like to interact and share stuff. So maybe this authorization thing is something that evolved and depends on this context your software is in. So I brought an example to make this somehow more explicit and discussable. I prepared an API, and it's taking requests and giving back responses, and has some database on it, and it's about something that's called just objects. And in my mind, maybe I was influenced by my son playing Minecraft, so it's about whatever you like is resources, water, stone, wood, whatever. And it's pretty simple. So we can just look at it without any authorization. As I have a background in JVM development, I like one of these frameworks. So it's either Quarkus or Spring Boot right now. And this thing is just starting. I prepared some HTTP calls, and once this is running, I will get a response. So if there's no resources at all, I will just get this empty array. I can create something on using post. There's a positive response. Afterwards, I can receive everything that is in my data. I can also reach a specific, so not the complete data that is in. I can also update it and read it afterwards. So the update has worked in the database. And of course, I can also delete it again. And deletion means it's gone and the array is empty again. So that's the API, that's the example. And right now it has no authorization at all. I think maybe most of you will probably know if you ever have something done in Quarkus. This is the reactive variant. So you have a post endpoint with a nice annotation, the get variants, patch and delete, and it's very well supported by these frameworks to build APIs. And this non-authorized version is also pretty easy. So no authorization, we have just a working example. But nowadays, as said, we want to have some authorization, and just to have some clear definition of what is meant. So distinguishing authentication, shortened by authN, is about proving in an identity. And there's a lot of things you probably know because I think they are famous maybe. So 5 to 10 years back, maybe OAuth 2 or OpenID Connect were there, but they were in my universe, in my bubble, they were not that highly distributed and known to especially developers. So it was sometimes also a discussion back then that people try to convince other people of, it's not that complicated. Let's just have the users in our database. There are libraries. We can just build that on our own. And I think that is pretty impressive how at least also with these protocols in place, these things evolve or still evolve. So there are things like this passwordless or hardware tokens or whatever when it comes to this field of just authenticate a user or an identity. So proving that you are who you pretend you are. In contrast, this authorization thing is maybe less, there are less standards around this. There's something started called OAuthN, also from the OpenID Connect guys. So there might be something there soon. But as far as I know, this is still in the draft state, so not that distributed and probably also not that much known by developers. So authorization is about granting or denying an entity access to another entity. And this is also not my idea. It's from some people that are built this organization called ID Pro. You can become a member there. You can visit all kind of material and trainings, and there's a certification becoming an identity expert. So I decided 4 years ago to maybe go into some deep into this topic instead of trying to be general and see and use all kind of things. And it was pretty amazing to me how this universe became maybe another universe inside. So this IAM topic is really, really huge, and there's conferences of its own, books on all parts of it, and really amazing how this going deep into this topic evolved, and how much I learned in this regard. So maybe you all know this thing where we would start probably when it comes to authorization or authentication first, so basic auth. And this is maybe boring because you just get a user, and it's very difficult to then do authorization just with a single user, because you can do probably everything then. And another idea is to introduce roles. So a very, very famous concept, I guess it comes from the 90s, as far as I know. So we can look at our API and into a variant where we would have implemented this roles or role-based access control idea. I only have a variant of Quarkus there. So using Quarkus means it's very easy because I can just use configuration. There's an application properties file, switch on authentication, use basic, and then I can just define what I want to allow in terms of a policy for a pattern of my API path or my API endpoints. And maybe it's not that easy to get or to grasp at once. So the idea would be I have read endpoints and I have changing endpoints like patch, delete, and post. And post, patch, delete, you have to be an admin, or you have to be part of the admin role. And Alice is in that admin role, and Bob is just a simple user. So if we would start using this variant of an API, we can not, or Bob could not create a resource because he's not in that admin group. And if you read from the API as Bob, it's not a problem, but you need to be Alice to actually create content. Afterwards, it's pretty easy for Bob to read the created content, but still via the single endpoint or the list. But Alice, of course, can also read the content and also access the single instance. But for Bob, again, it's not allowed to modify stuff. So he cannot update this known resource to him. You have to be Alice to actually do that update. Of course, Bob can read the result afterwards. So, and again, Bob is not allowed to delete stuff. It's only Alice. So, in that example, we have this basic idea of roles visible, but roles need to be managed, and you also need to manage users and password, as you see, and it's maybe not that nice to have that in your application, as mentioned. I still remember these discussions with people, and of course, always depends. So if your requirements are fine with this and you only have a single application, maybe there's these things are still useful to have them in your API. In my example, we now proceed and go to the next level, and we externalize this authentication stuff. So we introduce Keycloak to our system, and Keycloak has its own data and is responsible for users and everything that would be part of these user thing. So users probably have, beside an identifier, can be part of groups and roles. And in my API, I need to, or I want still to check if this is these endpoints the same way I did before. So what I need, or what I usually do, is I present a JOT token to my API, and inside of that JOT token, which we see very soon in the example, where inside just encoded, there's this JSON and the properties and all details of that user. And it cannot be manipulated, so this JOT token is protected by a signature. And this JOT token can get a JOT token from Keycloak. This is all part of this OpenID Connect OAuth 2 standards. So no need to build that on my own. It's very, I think nowadays it's really nice, and you find in all languages, frameworks, whatever, you find support for these things. So we somehow delegated authentication and introduced this JOTs, and of course we can also look into an example where this is used. So I stop the variant, and maybe we can now see a Spring Boot example and switch to running an example where a Spring Boot application is protected by this JOT token. And of course, I want to show Keycloak and the opinion of Keycloak on users and groups and roles and stuff. Sure, I don't want to go into details now. So you can have something called a realm, and realm is maybe something like a containment for users and all kinds of configuration. So I have some users here. I also have some groups and some roles. The idea of Keycloak groups would be if I am in a subgroup, then I'm also in that parent group, or considered to be in that parent group. When it comes to roles, there's a concept called composite roles. So in that case, I can say, okay, there's a role, and if you have that role, this means you are in these other roles too. So build some containment for roles and make it easier to assign actually roles to users, not to do that each role in a single way and maybe have a lot of work with it, but assign a role based on the business of that person, and this role then includes everything that is necessary or associated with it. So back to our example, we have now this protected API running, and if we access this, we get the answer, okay, not allowed, so please authenticate, and there's also an indication how this authentication should be done. I need to send something that is called this access token from OAuth 2. And of course, I can not just send some access token that I just imagine or just evented, or that may be outdated. So if we look at an example of a JOT token, we see, as mentioned before, it's protected by some signature, and you have all kind of data in it. And depending on the configuration, we also see, okay, there's the user's roles in it. And in my current example, I don't, there's the groups. And yeah, they are put into the token. I can send that token around, but in that case, the token is expired. So it has been from a very session very long time ago. So I guess it was for a meetup last year, and it's still there. for presentation purposes. So what I need to do is I need to gather a new token, and there are several ways gathering tokens, all described in OpenID Connect and OAuth. So the example here is I use something that is called resource owner password credentials grant. So I can just send a single request instead of multiple requests to gather that token. The token is saved then, and I can afterwards present it to my API, and it's authenticated again, so I have an answer. So I presented an valid token, and now I want to create a resource. Oh damn, so this user seems not to be allowed, and if you maybe remember, to create a resource you need to be admin. So I need to go back to the beautiful Keycloak view, use or find the user that I'm using, and see, okay, he's not in that required role. There's also an endpoint where I can inform myself on what is in that token. So there's also a protocol describing how to introspect a token. And I also see it there. This admin role is missing. So what I can do now, I can assign this role via this user interface, admin, assign it to the user, and then I should be able to gather a create resource. Unfortunately not, and maybe this is even too obvious. So the token that I have is not changed. So it's still inside this token, there's still not the correct role. So I need to gather and refresh that token, and afterwards I can inspect it and see if I am that admin role. That's the case. So now I should be able to create the resource. But we also saw this downside of using tokens. So again, I'm now able to access the API. I can update, I can view, I can also log in as a different user or create a token, and then see, okay, for the different users, there's no resources at all. And this brings us back to that these roles on identities are maybe not enough. So the issue of deciding if somebody is allowed to do something, so this authorization system core thing might not be influenced by the identity, which is in that case called subject, which could be the user John, it could be a system, it could be something that is accessing some other thing, and it has probably attributes as we just saw, and it's hopefully verified through authentication. So this proof of that subject that is about authentication. But there might be other things. So this action might be interesting. So reading, writing, whatever is an HTTP verb or whatever your API does or your system does could be described as the action that the subject wants to do, and something this logic could look at could be this action and decide or take this action into account. The other thing could be this resource thing, and in my case, it's also the name of or the type in my example. But in general, the resource when it comes to authorization is the thing that I want to access, and it could be just types. It could be a specific entity, so this resource with ID 42. It could also be an attribute of this specific resource. So on this resource side, it's really becoming interesting. And last but not least, it's also the context that could be considered when using authorization system or building an authorization system. Maybe you want to give access only during weekdays. Maybe you will look at the organizational unit in which context a specific user is accessing the resource, whatever. So this authorization decision is really not only about the subject and in my opinion, for sure, it's probably not enough to just have role on the roles on the subject side. Said there's this authn standard, which is currently in a draft status, as far as I know, or work in progress, and all these terms here I adjusted to the schema that is used there. So once this becomes a standard, maybe these terms are still working. And the idea of checking for some authorization is also in the schema is done using these terms. So next step would be I need some attribute on the resource, and that could be this owner field, which says, okay, I'm or something is the owner of that resource, which means, okay, I have ownership, but I still can't show or can decide, okay, this should still be my thing, but I want it to be visible to others, but I don't want to hand it over, so I don't want to change the ownership. I could introduce this viewer field, but that would mean, okay, then only one entity or one person can view it. So I introduce a role for that viewer field, and the owner that is also maybe worth becoming a group instead of just a single user. So we will look at this as an example too. So when it comes to damn, this my script says I can just keep it running. We can look at how this is implemented. In that case, the example is still Quarkus. So you have nice annotations for the post endpoint. You can just say, okay, you want to be authenticated, and for changes or for more sophisticated logic, you need to do more. So in the other example with Spring Boot, you have also an annotation, and you can also ask, okay, is this role admin assigned to a user, so you are allowed to do something? And as said in the example or in the slides, I introduced also this viewer and owner field, and in the next round we will also see that these things can contain more complex things. So I just will create another token, so I'm allowed to create things. And if I look at this resource now, I can see, okay, this is my user ID or the user ID of the user that created it. And this part says, okay, this user is the owner, and also this user is the owner, the viewer, or can view it. I can now use roles and groups. So what Keycloak or what I just showed, what is maintained in Keycloak is role user, and everyone with this role user should be able to view my resource. And there's also this group concept. So I want to change and allow write access to this resource by everyone that is part of this group. If I update it that way and look at it again, it's now reflected in the data, and I still can see it. So I'm obviously part of this viewer group. I can now also use another user. So user 2 is fetching the token, and this other user can also see that content, because I decided I want to have it seen by everyone in that viewer group. This other user is also allowed to patch it because he is in this group, and viewing is still possible. So with this extension and with the extension of the data model, it's now possible to give the view on resources, and also this possibility of change data to others by using groups and roles. So this is done by using code. So there's a concept about permissions, and there's even more support in both frameworks to actually implement something like this. In the end, you have parts where this code needs to be. So there's maybe framework support, but it's still in the end your decision, and done with code for Spring Boot and Quarkus. So maybe this is fine, and you're happy, and your requirements are fine. But if you just imagine the picture from the beginning, the context of the problem would be that these rules need to be everywhere in your system, and there need to be several places where these things need to be consistent. Maybe it's not a single application, a single API in one place. Maybe it's really a bigger system, and these things need to be consistent. And the other thing is, in the authorization world, these JOTs maybe have a problem because they are, as we see, they contain a specific set of roles or properties. And if you put roles or permissions even in there, and I saw during being a consultant, I saw some implementations of permission services, and people becoming problem because these JOTs have a limit because they are sent as a HTTP header, and most infrastructure is limiting this size of the JOT to 4 kilobytes, I guess. And people tend to put everything in these JOTs when it comes to authorization. Maybe these things become too big. And as said, the things in there are valid for a specific point in time. The JOT token is valid for hopefully minutes, but I also saw examples of JOTs that live an hour, 30 minutes, and then inside that time frame, these JOTs are accepted, and people look into the assigned roles in there, even if these roles already changed in Keycloak or in the system that is assigning these roles. If we just zoom out one more, so the decision of that authorization system may also be divided in, I want to decide in a central place. So the HTTP that is enforcing the decision is separated from the decision itself. And the question of somebody is allowed to view a resource that lives in that API might be answered in various places. So maybe you have more than one of these enforcement places, but you have only one place where this decision is done. You may also want this tracing stuff, so really able in your system to answer the question who has accessed a specific resource in the last 2 weeks, maybe. Maybe this question is from interest. Maybe you also want to separate the logic that is actually needs to be implemented or that is required to decide, and the information that is used in that decision. And maybe it's not only coming from one system, but from several systems. So it's maybe complicated. And maybe these people are not the same, or the source is not the same, which these things maintain. So the information might be the user itself, might be some administrative person that is allowed to change this stuff on that side, and the logic is something that is maintained by somebody else, and maybe not even by people that want to write code. And maybe you have this development, test, and production thing. So all these stuff is even complicated in that dimension. Also something I didn't invent it myself. So this is also at least known from people that look into these authorization stuff a lot longer than me. So the thing that I just explained comes from this source and is even more nicely depicted, but says the same thing. So if I look at my architecture again, so I have this authentication delegated, and now I have maybe in my system authorization in several places, and maybe I want to externalize it the same way I do with authentication. So authorization depends on identity, but maybe also on other ingredients. So it's not only about identity. And maybe there's other details in the database and in the data from my authentication system. So let's try to externalize this authorization thing as we do with the authentication. When it comes to what is the business of each of them, I would say, okay, we saw a lot of examples in the past 10 years how this authentication thing evolved, and there's multi-factor, there's change password, self-services, whatever. So if you look at a single login screen from a system like you built before, probably, then you want these features there. You want probably your features to be able to register themselves. You want to allow them to change passwords. You want to use them a second factor, so on and so on. And to me, it's really obvious that I don't want to implement authentication myself. And maybe these authorization stuff is similar. And there's a lot of terms in the authorization space and some involvement there and some requirements that are very well tackled there without having them to be implemented by myself or again and again. And for sure, if I look at this from a business perspective, it's even more obvious that I don't want to invest or give away money to rebuild these things again. As said, when I was allowed to look into this identity space, it's really impressive and amazing what is going on there. There's a lot of things invented, published, as said, on conferences, on talks, and to me, really amazing that there's another universe in my software development or software engineering universe. So there's a lot of choices when it comes to this externalized system. Probably you already know, or maybe not. I decided for the first step, I wanted to look into things that are have an idea in common that is called or is from a paper that was published by Google in 2019. So they have an idea published about their authentication system called Google Zanzibar, or just Zanzibar, and all these systems I just highlighted have in common that they somehow use the ideas from that paper. And unfortunately, I really wanted to look into many of them and also compare them. So today's example is an OpenFGA, and yeah, let's look into them. I will just briefly explain how it works. So you have this OpenFGA service, and you ask that question and translate this question in, is there a relation? So instead of just using the term is X or user X allowed to see something, you ask for a relation between these two entities, user X and resource epsilon. So if there's a connection in that system and relation is in use, so it's also abbreviated, or you find this term relation-based access control. And because of that object on the right side, and it can be as complex as you need to have it, it's also called fine-grained authorization, which is what this FGA thing is the abbreviation for. And this OpenFGA service has a data store beneath, and it consists mainly of two parts. So you have your authorization model, which is something we will see in a minute, but it's described basically the vocabulary and who's allowed to have what kind of relations, and the relevant data itself, which we also see in a minute. What you then can do is send check requests, and you just ask if there's a relation, and you will get true or false, and it has some properties that, for example, that it should be really quick, and you can run these checks as often as you like from another system. And you can also, or for sure, need to interact with these relations and tuples, because otherwise it would not work. So if we go for these two steps, we were just setting up these rules, and we will look into that much closer. It consists of a modeling language where you can introduce types and relations of that types. And you also need to use tuples, because just by saying, okay, there's a type user, and this user, or there's groups, and these groups have users, you would then have as instances all kind of tuples in there saying, okay, there's a group called ECME Northeast, and it has a subgroup, or that is subgroup of group ECME North. And these groups live as a relation in the OpenFGA service, but they are maintained somewhere else. And the same for our resource API. So you also need to have these tuples of that data, which resource by ID has a relation to which user. So then afterwards, or these need to be in sync, which is a hard problem on its own. But afterwards, I can use this external OpenFGA service in my architecture, and instead of using the token, I need to sync all that data that is relevant for these decisions beforehand. And if I want to check for some relation, or check for permission, do authorization, I would do a check request against this API, and I would get true or false as a response. And this check request does not need to contain everything. It just needs the relevant data, like the IDs of the two endpoints and the action that I want to check for. The JOT token can be much smaller, so I don't need roles in there. I only need, or really need, this user ID, and the user ID is not about to change that often. So in my system, I would now have these owner induced externalized, or this idea, and I have much simpler JOT tokens, and I would like to demonstrate this. And there's support in Spring Boot, and there's also support in Quarkus. Interesting, this Quarkus thing has support for other Zanzibar-based systems. So there's also you can also directly configure SpiceDB in there, instead of just having OpenFGA, which is, I think, the overall idea of using Zanzibar, the Zanzibar idea. So we will go down to next level. So we have externalized this authorization. In the admin console, we can just remove we can remove that user again, because we want to have the same situation as before. And to not have all these claims inside the token, I use a different client configuration, which not have has all these details configured or claims configured, so the token is much smaller. OpenFGA comes also with some view, so you can see the model, you can see all existing tuples, and this is prepared for the presentation. So everything that is inside of Keycloak is already synced to OpenFGA, and we can therefore ask OpenFGA different things, and you see, or probably you cannot not see it clearly, but it's suggesting me. So I can ask who is related to a specific group as member, and I get an answer in terms of these users are in that group. And I can ask OpenFGA all kind of questions as also a single check would do, where you would just ask if a specific user is in a group, and this is what we need to answer for our API example. There's also a nice plugin for IntelliJ and Visual Studio, I guess. So this model is externalized and can be saved, and you can see the types I use. This part is from Keycloak. There's some nice development in OpenFGA that allows to separate model parts and to have maybe this domain which is about users, groups, and roles, and maintained by people around your Keycloak service or your authentication service, and this part that is separated, and everything is then comes together when it comes to the OpenFGA service, but it can be maintained by these several groups. And there's also a file that is used for testing, where we have all kind of examples of these tuples I mentioned. All these relations should be considered for testing. And maybe I forgot to mention, so this one is the syntax to say, okay, the owner can be a user or the member of a group if a group is placed here, and the same for the role. So that needs to be specified that way. And we can now look into our example. I just like to run that one to make a new access token. And if we try to access our system protected by OpenFGA, we get, without a valid token, we get an 401. So I get a token again, in that case from this client too. So if I now access my API, I see, okay, no worries, you are a user, but creating a resource is not possible. If I go to Keycloak now and give this user that role, then this will change immediately, and I don't need to fetch a new token, because my token is much smaller, no roles in that, but I can now create a new resource without any changes in my token, because the information that I became the admin is stored in OpenFGA and considered during this authorization check. So we can, or we don't rely on that token any longer. Everything else works as before. I can update things. I can also become a different user, which is not seeing anything. I can become the previous user again, create another resource, see all that resources I created which just belong to me, and now do the same thing as I did before. I want to express, okay, ACME users or users with a role, ACME users can view anything or this resource, and the group members of group can update stuff. So I do that, and I'm still allowed to see it. Everything is changed. I switch the user again, and it's now possible to see that thing as before. I can even update this now because I'm in that group, see the changed thing, and also see the specific one as that specific user. So maybe the same thing as before, but we have now the implementation where we can look at. So as said, Google Zanzibar or this Quarkus Zanzibar. No, in that case it's Quarkus. You have annotations to express exactly what you want to check in OpenFGA. So this user type is the user. The relation that I want to check is assignee, and it's about being assigned to this admin role. So to use the post endpoint using these annotations, it's possible. And I don't need anything else beside the configuration of the OpenFGA service to get that running. If we go back to here, then we can also look into what we need to synchronize that data. So whenever there's a new resource created, I need to publish relations of the viewer relation and the owner relation, depending of what is in there. It could be a single user, but it also can be this group thing, and maintain these relations in parallel in OpenFGA. Does not need to be the complete resource and all the attributes of the resource, but whatever is relevant for this authorization decision. Keycloak also has a nice extension that was built by some famous person from Argentina, which is really involved in the identity space for a long time. And I tried to implement it myself because I wanted to see what's going on there. And as said, I also wanted to look into other authorization systems. And if you look into this Keycloak extension, it's about there's an event for this group change or assigning a user into a group. And what you basically do is for that assignment of that group, you also send a tuple that represents the relation between the user and the group. So nothing magic, but it's really a distributed system. There's network involved, so that it's not an easy problem. So if we look at our example again, we now have this nice Zanzibar system running, and if we look into our token and call the API, we can still create resources, and we are able to see all of our resources. If I stick in this member group, but assign a role that I'm not assigned to, this is now unfortunately possible, and I lose the visibility of that resource, which is really not sounding really useful or logic, because I'm the owner. Why the heck I should not be able to see a resource that I'm the owner of? And as said, this OpenFGA thing also has some nice API, and it also has some client that I can use from my command line. And what I want to do now is I want to change my example, and right now it's only possible to view something if I'm actually the viewer. So these two relations must exist, and then I'm allowed to view and to own my resource. So I want to change the data and the test should fail. So what I want to do is I want to adjust my system so that it's possible to actually see the car or see the resource when I'm the owner of that resource. And running the tests, should have done it before the adjustment, but I hope you believe that they have been green before. Right now they are false. We can probably quickly do it the other way around. So again, I remove that relation and I see, okay, now I need to fix this test, or I want to make the test passing. And what I can do now, because I have OpenFGA in place, is redefine that viewer thing and say or owner. So it must not be to view it. Actually, you can just define it that way, and now it would be possible to view it. So tests path. So by using FGA, we are now able to change the logic of our authentication system without touching any code. And if you remember that permission code I showed earlier, I had already code which is checking for this owner thing, and it's maybe not much code that I would need to adjust. But if the system is more complex, maybe there are several places and so on. So let's try what we need to do to actually update the model in our running system, which is not changed yet. So I can update the model with this change by using that call. And what I get back is a new authorization model ID. And by that, we would prevent that this model change somehow hurts my system. So it's highly recommended that in your systems, when using FGA, you always use a specific authorization model ID until you are sure that it's behaving nicely. Then switch these model IDs for different variants of your model. And if I go back to my API, then I would just get another token, and it's possible for me to see my resource again. And basically, that's what I want to show. So we externalize this authorization thing, and we also are also possible, or it's also possible now to change that authorization logic by adjusting this model. And there are still problems left. So as I said, and I really want to emphasize this is nice, but we have this distributed data thing. And in the Zanzibar paper, there's also something mentioned that is called the new enemy problem. And I want to quickly talk about that one. So the new enemy problem from that paper says, and maybe it's really obvious. So either ACL updates are not considered in correct order, or there's old ACL data used with new, or an old ACL that is used with new data. So in the beginning, I assigned this admin role to somebody. So this is maybe this ACL update. And afterwards, the user was able to read something or to do something. So in that case, maybe it's not that problematic if this ACL update would be executed after Bob tries to read the data. So you will get forbidden, and then it works some day or some hour later. If you would look in a scenario where this this ACL data is removed from Bob, so he should not be allowed to read something any longer. And Alice also adds new data afterwards, and this is somehow screwed. Then Bob would be able to read the data if this is in a different order. So it's really something you should consider if and especially if you have a distributed system for this. So summary from my point of view is you might or you might not to review your authorization requirements. So it's totally depending on what comes from there. If there's something and maybe you have a lot of roles and maybe these roles have names in it like read, write, and some other terms that maybe make it obvious that these roles are not enough and maybe they are complicated to handle, and you really want to consider something explicit for authorization. This standardization is work in progress right now, and I think it's really something to consider for external authorization. Yeah, that's it. That was everything I wanted to share.
Yeah, wow, Sebastian, thanks so much for your talk. You know that this topic is one of my kryptonite topics, so I'm really not too much into it, and I think you did a great job of explaining all of the different solution approaches. So thanks for that. And there have been, as you can see, a lot of at least some questions in the chat. So Maxim, do you want to ask your questions? Which one are still relevant, or should I read them? But you can also talk.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure, why not? Well, first, thanks, Sebastian. That's a lot of work. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I somehow have several questions, but maybe I'll just start from the beginning because you touched several topics. So regarding the talk, and since I'm also involved a lot in all kinds of APIs and integrations, right? And usually I am also involved in building kind of system in the enterprise context where, there are lots of applications and some are concerned about performance, some are about integrations. There's lots of different topics. Mm-hmm. So that's also why I'm here to listen how things are done properly. So anyway, my, I guess, biggest question is, how would you keep an overview over if you have one or multiple applications and you would still have an overview over so which roles can do what, right, in an application in terms of authorization? And I've as I wrote, I already lost you after 15 minutes. What can Bob do, right? And if you're not a developer who is proactively working with an application, or maybe you're on vacation, somebody needs to catch up, right? So what's the best way to maybe document this, or what's your solution?
So if the specific question would be what can a user do, or what an application could do, or what actions are allowed, I think these guys think of a search endpoint. So you have something in that system that is especially for authorization, and you can specifically also ask these kind of questions. So you don't need to track it somehow separately, but you can always ask.
So it kind of asks that graph, which is right behind the FGA. Cool. So it's like you put another system kind of, and okay, so if anyone has a question, just ask, kind of.
Yeah, I remember that there have been something on the mailing list in that regard.
I think I saw an example of what you described. I used to be at demos of a company called Curity, if you know them.
Yeah, maybe no,
so
but
it's not open source, but they kind of, I think they do the similar relation-based approach, and I think they also showed something similar. So now I remembered, yeah. Right, so shall I continue with questions?
Yeah, please.
Unless, I don't know, maybe Florian has some. Right, so in terms of tokens, I guess the biggest concern that I've experienced is like, how do you invalidate them? Right, so tokens have a time to live, and if a token is invalidated, but it's still kind of, it still flows somewhere in the system in someone's hands, there is always a trade-off versus you want to validate each and every token versus you want to cache them for performance.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's the best strategy here in your experience?
Yeah, it totally depends on what your requirements are saying. But as you say, so you could call back the author, the identity system that issued the token and ask if it's still valid. And there's this RFC that is where it's possible to kill tokens that or to revoke tokens.
Is there any
it's a
solution
trade-off.
you maybe saw on the market which does it the best? It's kind of the fastest invalidation while keeping the validation performant.
Yeah. So I only remember discussions which balance these two things. So you have a small amount of time by maybe 5 minutes or 3 minutes that a token is valid. Maybe that risk that it's flowing around for a lot of time is going down. But having tokens that only live for 3 minutes also means, depending on the system, you have a lot of load and a lot of tokens issued.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still puzzled by this question because at multiple clients you're kind of faced with this decision, and then it's always it's a balance, as you say. But
tokens are a topic, in my opinion, for itself. So people even write about topic-based authentication or authorization. So it's really interesting, maybe what happens there, because if you also try to keep a token as powerful for a specific transaction, then you maybe need something like token exchange, so you can add a token that is more powerful only on seldom occasions, and also the risk that the token is or can be misused is getting smaller, but it's also a lot of effort to build your systems
that's
that way.
complexity.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give you some silver bullet for that one.
Then I'm gone. No, anyway, thank you.
Thank you for the discussion. It's really great. It was. I hoped to meet some people here that I want to discuss this.
Yeah.
I just learned that Maxim is also on LinkedIn, so you can continue the discussion over the next weeks and months. Just mentioning that. All right, so yeah, thanks again, Sebastian. One organizational question from me. Is this code base, this great example code base, is this available via GitHub? For example,
I think
GitHub?
not yet. So
Okay.
I really think that I'm not sure if I want to publish it, but yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
And you can also then create comments and things there. What can be improved. For me, it has been a decision to have these things not in branches but separately. So it's basically the resource definition is in there now 9 times, because I want to explicitly update one thing, and I tried with branches, but it's a totally mess.
Yeah.
And you don't can look into these things easily on GitHub then.
Yeah, true. All right, but nevertheless, we have the video recording here, and this is great so far. So, okay, again, thanks, Sebastian. I would like to end the official part of this event now, but you are welcome to stay here and continue your discussion. This will be uploaded on YouTube as soon as I get to cut it. And yeah, maybe, Sebastian, you can also provide the slides that are going on the website. Again, next month and the months after that, there will not be an event, but we will continue this series of events in September 25. And yeah, again, looking forward to talks with you, and stay healthy. Have a nice evening and see you soon.